Maggie had been running on empty for weeks, juggling her career, household chores, and the delicate balance of life in a blended family, and by the time Tuesday evening rolled around, she was desperate for a quiet moment, a break from the endless responsibilities that seemed to pile up no matter how much effort she put in. And when she got home earlier than usual, hoping to catch Mark before he left for his evening shift, the house felt unusually silent, only the faint patter of rain on the windows, and the occasional creak of the floorboards interrupting the stillness. And as she moved through the hallway toward the home office, she noticed the door slightly ajar, something she had learned to automatically check because in their home, doors were usually closed and locked, a small but consistent habit that kept the household organized and safe, and yet tonight, the open door held a different kind of tension, an almost imperceptible invitation for curiosity, and although her first instinct was to knock, fatigue and the need for immediate understanding made her pause for only a moment before stepping inside quietly, expecting perhaps to find Mark alone or nothing at all. And instead, she was met with a scene that immediately tightened her chest and sent a wave of uncertainty through her, because Mark was there, but he wasn't alone. He was speaking with a woman Maggie didn't recognize, her laughter and relaxed tone filling the room in a way that Maggie had never heard before. And for a split second, Maggie froze, unsure whether to retreat, confront, or simply process what she was witnessing, her heart pounding as questions and emotions collided inside her. Shock, confusion, fear, and a strange sense of vulnerability all at once. And she realized that in a single moment, the stability and assumptions she had held about her marriage, her home, and the trust she placed in the people around her had been disrupted, forcing her to confront uncertainty. And as she stepped back slightly, her eyes taking in the details of the interaction, she noticed small things she had overlooked before. The ease with which they talked, the way Mark's posture was relaxed, the casual gestures, the soft humor exchanged, all of which combined to create an impression that was confusing, intimate, and simultaneously harmless in ways she couldn't immediately interpret. And Maggie felt an internal tug of war, wanting to believe in the best while her mind raced through worst-case scenarios, and she realized how quickly assumptions can form when emotions are high, how a momentary lapse in observation, like a door left unlocked, can trigger an avalanche of feelings and suspicions, and even though part of her screamed to leave and process privately, another part was anchored in the desire to understand the reality of the situation, to separate imagination from truth, to find clarity before acting. And as she stood there, the rain continuing its soft rhythm against the windows, Maggie recognized that her emotional reaction wasn't just about jealousy or mistrust, but about longing for connection, reassurance, and transparency in her marriage. And that moment illuminated how much she had neglected her own needs and the subtle gaps in communication with Mark, gaps that had allowed small uncertainties to grow unchecked, creating fertile ground for fear and misunderstanding. And Maggie also thought about Ethan, her stepson, whose small oversight in leaving the door unlocked had inadvertently set the stage for this confrontation with her emotions, and she felt a mixture of frustration, guilt, and awareness that even minor actions can carry unexpected consequences in a household where routines and responsibilities intertwine. And that realization made her pause, breathe, and remind herself that acting impulsively could escalate confusion into conflict. And she took a quiet step backward, allowing herself to observe without interference, to gather facts before judgment, and to consider the possibility that her initial fears might be unfounded, while also acknowledging the raw, unfiltered feelings the moment had triggered. Feelings of hurt, curiosity, longing, and the deep desire to protect her emotional space while understanding what had truly occurred. And as she quietly closed the door behind her, giving herself room to process, Maggie felt an odd mixture of vulnerability and clarity, knowing that this evening, sparked by a simple unlocked door, would mark the beginning of a series of emotional discoveries, reflections, and conversations that could reshape her perception of trust, intimacy, and awareness within her family. And she understood that navigating these emotions carefully, with patience and intentionality, was the only way to preserve relationships, foster understanding, and transform a moment of uncertainty into an opportunity for connection and growth. And as the night deepened and the rain continued its gentle rhythm, Maggie realized that the unlocked door had opened more than a physical space. It had opened a doorway into her own heart, revealing fears, desires, and the profound human need for clarity, honesty, and emotional closeness. And she felt that this single, quiet moment would stay with her, a catalyst for reflection, dialogue, and the careful rebuilding of trust, communication, and awareness in her household. After the unsettling evening, Maggie couldn't stop thinking about what she had seen, and even though the initial shock had faded slightly, a swirl of emotions stayed with her all the next morning, coloring every thought and action, making her hyper-aware of small details that previously would have gone unnoticed, like the way Mark moved through the kitchen, the slight tension in his voice during phone calls, and the quiet spaces where laughter should have been. And as she poured herself coffee and tried to focus on the day ahead, she realized that her mind was replaying the scene over and over, analyzing gestures, expressions, and the tone of voice she had overheard, trying to separate imagination from reality. And she felt a complicated mix of worry, longing, and the need for understanding, recognizing that her reaction wasn't just about suspicion, but about a deeper craving for emotional connection and reassurance that had been quietly building in her marriage. And as the morning wore on, she noticed small signs of normalcy: the kids moving through the house, breakfast being prepared, Mark's routine beginning. But the lingering tension made her hyper-aware, and she began to reflect on the ways communication had shifted between her and Mark over the past months, how small misunderstandings and unspoken frustrations had slowly built distance, and she realized that this single moment, triggered by an unlocked door, was amplifying underlying concerns she hadn't fully acknowledged, prompting her to consider how she could address these feelings with clarity and calmness rather than letting fear or imagination dominate. And as she moved through the day, helping Ethan with homework and observing the small interactions between him and Jason, she found herself paying closer attention to the dynamics of their relationships, realizing that awareness, observation, and intentional communication were essential tools in understanding the people she cared about. And she recognized that the emotional impact of witnessing what she thought might be a breach of trust was less about actual betrayal, and more about her need to feel connected, acknowledged, and secure in her family life. And that understanding helped her pause and breathe, knowing that approaching the situation with patience, reflection, and open-mindedness would be far more effective than reacting impulsively. And as the evening approached, Maggie noticed Mark entering the living room, his expression casual, unaware of the storm of thoughts she had been carrying. And she considered how she could initiate a conversation that would clarify the situation without confrontation, how she could express her feelings of concern, longing, and vulnerability without blame. And as she brewed a cup of tea to calm her nerves, she realized that the unlocked door had inadvertently created an opportunity for honest reflection, for noticing gaps in communication, and for acknowledging emotions that had quietly accumulated over time. And she felt a quiet gratitude for the chance to pause and consider her own needs as well as the dynamics of her household, understanding that emotional turbulence can often be a signal that deeper connection and awareness are required. And as night fell and the house grew quiet, Maggie prepared for bed, folding laundry and setting aside the small details of the day, while still thinking about the importance of clarity, observation, and empathy. And she resolved that the next day she would approach Mark with gentle honesty, seeking understanding rather than accusation, because she recognized that relationships are strengthened not through confrontation or assumption, but through intentional dialogue, patience, and listening. And as she finally lay down, the soft hum of the night around her, she allowed herself to feel the mix of relief, anticipation, and quiet nervousness that comes with facing uncertainty thoughtfully, knowing that tomorrow could bring clarity, deeper understanding, and a renewed sense of emotional intimacy. and she reflected on how a single moment, a simple unlocked door, had prompted a cascade of awareness, reflection, and the realization that even small oversights can trigger meaningful introspection, leading to personal growth, stronger bonds, and a deeper appreciation for the people she loved, and she drifted to sleep with the intention to approach the next day with openness, empathy, and courage, ready to navigate the delicate balance of trust, communication, and connection within her family. The next morning, Maggie woke with a mix of nervous anticipation and determination, feeling the lingering weight of the previous evening's confusion, yet knowing she needed clarity. And as she moved through her routine, making coffee and organizing the kitchen, she observed every small detail, from the way Mark moved around the house to the way Ethan interacted with his friends, recognizing that even ordinary actions carried subtle signs of underlying emotions and relationship dynamics, and she realized that her perspective had shifted. No longer was she merely reacting emotionally. Instead, she was actively observing, seeking understanding, and preparing to engage in open, honest communication. And as the day progressed, she reflected on her own role in the household, the ways she may have unintentionally allowed distance to grow, and the importance of empathy, patience, and attentive presence. And she recognized that emotional misinterpretations often arise not from deliberate actions, but from missed signals, unspoken stresses, and assumptions that fill the gaps where understanding is absent. And by mid-morning, Maggie felt ready to approach the situation thoughtfully, knowing that confronting Mark without preparation could escalate tensions, whereas calmly expressing her feelings and asking for context could foster clarity, connection, and renewed trust. And so she waited for a quiet moment when Ethan and Jason were occupied with homework, and the house felt still, and gently asked Mark about the previous evening, framing her words with curiosity and vulnerability rather than accusation, expressing how the unlocked door had startled her, how she had walked in unexpectedly, and how the scene had left her feeling uncertain and anxious. And she watched carefully as Mark's expression shifted from surprise to understanding. And he explained calmly that the woman she had seen was a colleague who had stopped by to discuss a pressing work matter, and that the laughter she heard was simply relief and camaraderie over the stress of a project, not any personal or romantic connection. And as Maggie listened, relief began to replace tension, though a lingering awareness of how quickly emotions can spiral remained, reminding her of the importance of trust, observation, and communication. And she realized that her response to the unexpected moment had revealed her own need for reassurance, transparency, and closeness, and by openly discussing her feelings, she not only gained clarity about the situation, but also strengthened the emotional connection with Mark, opening a space for honesty and vulnerability that had been absent in recent weeks. And as the conversation continued, they explored other aspects of their relationship, small frustrations, unspoken needs, and subtle moments of distance that had quietly accumulated, allowing both of them to express themselves, listen deeply, and understand each other's perspectives. And Maggie noticed how much their bond deepened simply through dialogue and the willingness to be emotionally present, realizing that clarity and trust are cultivated not through avoidance or assumptions, but through patient listening, reflection, and intentional communication. And she felt a renewed sense of intimacy and appreciation for Mark, recognizing that the unlocked door, which had initially caused anxiety and fear, had inadvertently created an opportunity to confront hidden gaps in understanding and strengthen their connection. And as the afternoon progressed, Maggie observed Ethan, who was quietly helping Jason with a project, and she appreciated how minor actions, like leaving a door unlocked, could unexpectedly prompt reflection, empathy, and growth within a family. And she smiled softly, realizing that relationships require attentiveness, patience, and awareness of both actions and perceptions, and that small gestures, honest communication, and intentional observation can transform moments of uncertainty into opportunities for trust and emotional closeness. And as evening approached, she prepared dinner with a sense of calm and renewed connection. noticing Mark's small gestures of care and attention, reflecting on how meaningful presence, empathy, and honest expression can create lasting emotional bonds, and she felt a quiet gratitude for the lesson learned, that misunderstandings are rarely about malice, often about misperception, and that the courage to approach situations thoughtfully can turn confusion into understanding, tension into dialogue, and uncertainty into strengthened relationships. And as Maggie finally settled into the living room with a book, watching Ethan laugh with his friend, she realized that the emotional journey sparked by a simple unlocked door had deepened her awareness, her patience, and her capacity for empathy, teaching her that clarity, honesty, and careful observation are essential ingredients in nurturing family bonds, and she felt a comforting sense of fulfillment, knowing that she had turned a moment of fear and doubt into one of connection, learning, and emotional growth for herself, for Mark, and for her household. And that night, as the house quieted and the soft hum of rain against the windows accompanied her thoughts, Maggie reflected on how openness, trust, and courage to engage thoughtfully with challenging emotions can transform uncertainty into understanding, misinterpretation into clarity, and tension into lasting bonds. And she drifted to sleep with a renewed sense of hope, love, and commitment to fostering emotional intimacy, presence, and awareness in her family, recognizing that even a single moment of unexpected disruption can become a powerful catalyst for growth, reflection, and deeper connection when approached with care, empathy, and patience. In the days that followed, Maggie noticed subtle but profound changes in the household, a renewed sense of warmth and awareness that hadn't been there before. And she realized that the simple incident of the unlocked door had set in motion a cascade of reflection, conversation, and emotional growth that strengthened the bonds between everyone in the family. And as she moved through her daily routines, she observed Mark being more attentive, present, and communicative, sharing small details about his day, expressing appreciation for her efforts, and responding with care to her observations. And she saw how even minor adjustments in behavior and attention could create an atmosphere of understanding, trust, and connection. And Maggie also noticed Ethan's presence differently. He was quieter, more thoughtful, and subtly more aware of the way his actions affected others, and she recognized that his small oversight in leaving the door unlocked had inadvertently triggered a learning moment for the entire family, highlighting the importance of attention, responsibility, and mindfulness. And as she interacted with both Mark and Ethan, she felt a growing appreciation for the power of observation and communication, realizing that relationships often thrive, not on grand gestures, but on consistent, intentional acts of presence, empathy, and honesty. And Maggie began to leave small notes for Mark and Ethan, expressing gratitude, encouragement, and acknowledgement, noticing how these tiny gestures created ripples of warmth, laughter, and deeper emotional connection throughout the house. And she reflected on the ways tension and misunderstanding often arise from assumptions, lack of awareness, and missed opportunities to communicate. And she understood that by approaching moments of uncertainty with patience, curiosity, and calm, she could transform potential conflict into opportunities for intimacy and trust. And as the evenings passed, she and Mark began sharing more intentional time together, discussing feelings, hopes, and challenges, laughing over small misunderstandings, and building a rhythm of mutual support and appreciation that reinforced their emotional bond. And Maggie realized that emotional closeness requires courage, the courage to confront doubts, to express vulnerability, and to listen without judgment, and that even events that initially spark fear or uncertainty can become catalysts for growth when handled with care, reflection, and empathy. And she saw how these lessons extended beyond her marriage to her relationship with Ethan, appreciating how careful attention, dialogue, and acknowledgement nurtured his confidence, empathy, and awareness, and how the household's atmosphere shifted from one of routine and subtle distance to one of warmth, attentiveness, and emotional presence. And Maggie felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing that the family could navigate challenges and misperceptions without letting them fester. Learning instead to transform small disruptions into meaningful conversations and connections, and she reflected on the journey that began with the unlocked door and her impulsive choice to walk in, realizing that the moment of tension had become an unexpected opportunity to strengthen trust, encourage honesty, and foster empathy across generations. And as she prepared for bed each night, she allowed herself to feel gratitude for the lessons, the renewed bonds, and the growth that had emerged from uncertainty, understanding that the ability to observe, reflect, and communicate thoughtfully can turn moments of fear into moments of clarity, misunderstanding into understanding, and disruption into deeper intimacy. And she recognized that this awareness would guide her in the future, helping her nurture relationships with patience, presence, and consistent care. And as the household settled into quiet, Maggie watched Ethan laugh with a friend or Mark sip tea thoughtfully, and she felt a quiet joy at the resilience, connection, and emotional depth that had been cultivated through deliberate attention, empathy, and honesty. And she understood that even a single incident, a simple unlocked door, could ripple through days and nights, shaping emotional awareness, strengthening bonds, and teaching the family the enduring value of trust, communication, and mindful presence. And as she finally lay down to sleep, the soft hum of the night surrounding her, Maggie felt complete, knowing that the experience had deepened her love, understanding, and commitment to nurturing her family with awareness, kindness, and emotional honesty, and that the lessons learned in those days would resonate far beyond the moment, creating a foundation of trust, empathy, and connection that would guide them through future challenges with care, patience, and mutual respect, turning uncertainty into opportunity, fear into understanding, and small gestures into lasting bonds that filled their home with warmth, love, and emotional richness.